Lexie Hull was never supposed to be that player.
Working on Williams. Hull gets it to go. And a foul.
Came into the WNBA as a scrappy defender, the kind of player who hustles, crashes the glass, and gives you energy in short bursts. On most nights, her job was simple: play defense, hit the occasional three, and stay in her lane while the stars carried the offense.
It obviously feels good, I think, for me, just playing with confidence. We're missing people, so
That's the version of Lexie most people thought they knew. But then came this game. Indiana's roster was shredded to pieces.
Everyone's got to do a little bit extra, be a little bit more aggressive offensively, so that was my mindset going in.
6 players out, the bench looking more like a medical ward than a professional basketball team. Fans walked into the arena expecting another blowout, maybe even a depressing reminder of how thin this roster really was. What nobody expected was for Lexie Hull to transform into the star of the night. From the opening tip, she looked like a completely different player. Her confidence was visible, her shot was smooth, and instead of waiting for the game to come to her, she went out and took it. Early threes splashed straight through the net.
Oh, looking inside for Boston. She will launch and knock down a three. Lexie Hull's hit a pair.
Like she'd been doing it for years. Then came the backdoor cuts, perfectly timed runs to the basket that left Minnesota's defense spinning. Every possession, it felt like she was everywhere. By halftime, she already had 18 points.
It's a Lexie Hull show here.
Think about that. In just 20 minutes, a player who rarely dominates the box score was carrying an entire franchise on her back. Fans at home couldn't believe it. Commentators couldn't believe it. And even her own teammates admitted afterward that they weren't expecting Hull to light up the scoreboard like this. This wasn't garbage time padding. This wasn't lucky shooting. It was a statement. On a night when Indiana had every reason to fold, Lexie Hull refused to blend into the background. She wasn't the role player anymore. She was the answer to the question nobody saw coming. But
we're down people, so gotta suck it up, play a little tired a few minutes.
Here's the thing. Her sudden rise didn't just give the Fever a chance. It also exposed something far bigger and far more dangerous about the state of this team. If Lexie Hull's breakout felt like a miracle, it's only because the Indiana Fever have been living through a nightmare. No other team in the league has been gutted by injuries like this one. Night after night, it feels like another key piece goes down and the rotation shrinks even further. By the time this game tipped off, Indiana wasn't just shorthanded. They were holding their season together with tape and prayer. Caitlin Clark, out with a groin injury. Sophie Cunningham, gone for the year with a torn MCL. Sydney Colson, sidelined with an ACL tear. Ari McDonald, shut down because of a foot issue. That's 4 reliable players gone before you even step on the court. And then, just when the Fever thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Chloe Bibby, one of the few forwards left standing, felt soreness during warm-ups and was pulled before the game even started. Later that night, Odyssey Sims, the veteran point guard brought in for stability, left the floor with an injury and never came back. Suddenly, the Fever weren't just missing stars, they were missing an entire rotation. That's 6 players. 6 gone. The result? Indiana was forced to roll out lineups that looked more like a training camp scrimmage than a playoff push. Guards who barely practiced with the team were suddenly running the offense. Players signed to hardship contracts were being asked to hold the line against one of the deepest teams in the league. And Lexie Hull? She became the last regular wing option left standing, forced into extended minutes whether she was tired or not. Fans watching could feel the tension. It wasn't just a basketball game anymore, it was survival. Every substitution felt like rolling dice. Every possession looked like it could collapse at any second. And that's why Hull's sudden scoring explosion hit so hard. She wasn't just keeping Indiana competitive, she was fighting against a storm that had swallowed the entire roster. But as inspiring as her performance was, it couldn't erase the cracks forming everywhere else. Because when the second half arrived, that miracle energy was about to meet the harsh reality that has haunted this team all season. For a moment, it looked like Indiana might actually pull it off. The first half was everything Fever fans had been begging to see. Lexie Hull drilling jumpers with zero hesitation. Kelsey Mitchell slicing through defenders like it was nothing. Aaliyah Boston fighting inside, giving them some presence in the paint. The bench, even though thin, was on their feet after every make. For the first time in weeks, there was energy, there was swagger, there was belief. By halftime, Indiana had a lead. Not just a lucky run, not just a spark, a real lead against a Minnesota team loaded with depth and experience. And the way the Fever were playing, it didn't feel like a fluke. Fans watching at home thought, hold on, could this actually be the night they shock everyone? But if you followed Indiana this season, you already know what came next. The third quarter, the black hole where everything good seems to disappear. Almost instantly, momentum flipped. Minnesota came out of halftime with a fire that Indiana couldn't match. They spread the floor, pushed the pace, and attacked straight-line drives like it was a drill. On the other end, Indiana's offense froze. Ball movement slowed, spacing collapsed, and possessions ended with rushed shots or unforced turnovers. And then came the avalanche. The Lynx outscored Indiana 32-7 in the third quarter alone. Yes, 32-7. A halftime lead turned into a blowout in the span of minutes. All that energy, all that belief from first half, gone. Fans online were furious. Commentators couldn't stop repeating the same stat. How does a team collapse like this over and over again? That's the part that stings the most, because this wasn't the first time. This was becoming a pattern. The Fever would shine early, give fans hope, and then crumble the moment adjustments were needed. And while some blamed fatigue or injuries, more and more voices started pointing in another direction, straight at the coaching staff. Because one question couldn't be ignored. Why does this keep happening? When a collapse happens once, you call it a bad night. When it happens twice, maybe it's just bad luck. But when it happens over and over again, fans stop blaming the players, and they start looking at the sidelines. Head coach Stephanie White found herself right in the center of the storm. Social media lit up during and after the game. Why are the Fever always flat after halftime? Where are the adjustments? How many more leads do we have to watch disappear? These weren't just frustrated fans shouting into the void. They were putting a spotlight on a pattern that has haunted Indiana's entire season. The numbers tell the story. Time and time again, the Fever walk into halftime with momentum, only to come out looking like a completely different team. Defensive rotations slow down. Box-outs disappear. Opponents suddenly get wide-open threes and second-chance points. On offense, the flow breaks down, and possessions stall into isolation or rushed heaves. It's not just execution. It feels like Indiana simply isn't responding when other teams turn up the pressure. White didn't dodge the questions afterward. She admitted that the team had breakdowns in communication and that integrating two new point guards mid-season made things messy. She pointed to fatigue, to turnovers, and to a lack of spacing. In other words, she explained it as a roster problem, not necessarily a coaching one. And to her credit, this roster is held together with duct tape right now. No coach could magically fix 6 missing players, but fans weren't buying it. They've heard the explanations before. Injuries can explain some of it, sure, but not the complete meltdown every single third quarter, and not the absence of visible adjustments while the other team runs wild. To many, it looked like the Fever were being out-coached, out-prepared, and out-maneuvered every single time. That's why the spotlight burned brighter than ever after this game, because while Lexie Hull was out there putting on the performance of her life, the narrative around Indiana shifted again. The question was no longer just about effort. It was about leadership. And while the coach gave her explanations, Hull herself revealed something much more raw, and it gave fans a whole new reason to rally behind her. When the game ended and reporters swarmed her, Lexie Hull didn't sound like someone celebrating a career night. She didn't puff out her chest or act like she had arrived. Instead, she gave the kind of answer that told you exactly why her performance mattered so much. She said it straight. We're down people, so everyone's got to do a little more. No excuses, no sugarcoating, just the reality of a team being forced to survive with half a roster. She admitted she was exhausted, logging nearly 37 minutes when most nights she barely touches that number. She even joked with her teammates about who played more minutes, showing that the burden wasn't just hers. Everyone was stretched to the limit. But the honesty didn't stop there. When asked how she managed to score so efficiently, she gave a simple answer. Just read the defense, keep moving, and take whatever they give. It wasn't some flashy speech about being unstoppable. It was the mentality of a player who understood that her team couldn't afford for her to play small. She had to be aggressive. She had to hunt her shots. And for the first time this season, she leaned into that role completely. Even her coach, Stephanie White, couldn't ignore it. She praised Hull afterward for being aggressive, saying she finally saw Lexie hunting shots. That one line struck a chord, because up until now, Hull was often waiting for the game to come to her. This time, she went out and took it. Fans picked up on it too. Her effort wasn't just about numbers. It was about attitude. Watching Hull play fearless lit a spark that the Fever desperately needed. It was the kind of performance that made you believe the team still had a heartbeat, even as everything around them was falling apart. And that's why her words hit even harder. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She wasn't pointing fingers. She was quietly showing that no matter how broken things get, somebody is still willing to step up. But Hull wasn't alone, because while she was having the best night of her career, a few teammates found ways to keep the fight alive too, and one of them delivered a message that nobody expected. Lexie Hull might have been the headline, but she wasn't carrying the weight alone. Even in the middle of a roster crisis, a few key players found ways to keep the Fever alive. First, there was Kelsey Mitchell, the engine of this team. She dropped 27 points, drilled 5 of 7 from 3, and kept creating offense when everything else stalled. But what stood out even more happened before the game. Her teammates arrived wearing MVP Kelsey shirts, a gesture that stunned her. In the middle of a season defined by setbacks, it was a rare show of unity, a reminder that the locker room still believed in their leader. After the game, Mitchell admitted how much it meant to her. They make me feel like I'm important to them. That value means everything. She didn't just talk like a leader. She played like one, refusing to let the Fever fold even when Minnesota turned up the pressure. Then there was Aaliyah Boston. Her stat line, 15 points, 6 rebounds, didn't scream domination, but it told the story of survival. Night after night, she's asked to anchor the paint without much help, and against Minnesota's depth, she still found ways to keep the Fever competitive. Critics said her defense didn't always meet the all-star standard, but considering she was battling fatigue and double teams, her steadiness mattered more than the box score admitted. And then came the surprise. Shea Petty, signed to a hardship contract, barely had time to practice, yet she walked in and hit 3 of 4 from deep, finishing with 10 points. For a team scrambling just to field lineups, Petty's composure on catch-and-shoot looks was a shock the Fever desperately needed. It wasn't perfect. Running the offense was still a work in progress, but her spark gave Indiana a lift no one expected. Together, these pieces created something that didn't show up in the final score. They showed fight. They showed loyalty. They showed that even when the roster is torn apart, pride doesn't disappear. For a stretch, it felt like Indiana wasn't just surviving. They were reminding everyone that this team still has heart. But heart alone doesn't fix the standings. And the reality of the playoff race is where the story takes a darker turn. Here's the cold reality. The Indiana Fever don't have time left to figure this out. After this loss, they were clinging to 6th place, barely half a game ahead of the 7th seed, and only a game and a half clear of 9th. In the WNBA, that's the danger zone. One bad week, one losing streak, and the playoff window slams shut. That's why this collapse hurt more than just the scoreboard. Every single loss now feels like it chips away at the entire season. And the questions aren't just about who's injured. They're about whether this team can even survive long enough to stay in the race. For fans, the frustration keeps circling back to two possibilities. On one side, you've got the injury excuse. 6 rotation players out, constant lineup shuffling, point guards signed on 7-day contracts trying to run plays they barely know. From that perspective, you could argue no coach in the league could win under these conditions. The Fever aren't failing because of bad strategy. They're failing because they simply don't have the bodies. But then, there's the coaching argument. The pattern of third-quarter meltdowns, the lack of in-game adjustments, the visible drop-off in energy after halftime, those aren't just about injuries. Fans argue that even with a thin roster, you can't keep letting opponents dictate games the same way every single time. And when you watch the Fever crumble over and over again, it feels less like bad luck and more like bad preparation. That's the split tearing through the fan base right now. Do you point the finger at a roster gutted by injuries or at a coaching staff that hasn't been able to stop the bleeding? The truth is, both sides have a point. The Fever are missing too many players, but they're also repeating the same mistakes. And that combination, bad luck plus bad habits, is deadly in a playoff chase this tight. Which leaves one final question. If this team keeps stumbling, does anyone really believe they can finish the job? When you strip everything away, this night wasn't really about a win or a loss. It was about a player stepping into the spotlight when her team needed it most. Lexie Hull didn't just put up a career high. She showed what the Fever could look like if more players carried that same fearless energy. For the first time, fans saw her not as a role player, not as a name buried on the roster, but as a piece of the future. Alongside her, Kelsey Mitchell reminded everyone why she's the heart of this franchise. Aaliyah Boston proved she can steady the ship even when the waves are crashing. And Shea Petty gave Indiana a reason to believe that help can come from most unexpected places. Those flashes are real and they matter. But let's be honest, flashes alone don't save seasons. The Fever are running out of time. Every injury makes the climb steeper. Every collapse chips away at their margin for error. And every third-quarter breakdown makes fans wonder if this team is learning from its mistakes or stuck repeating them. That's what makes Hull's breakout both inspiring and haunting. Inspiring because it showed that even under impossible circumstances, players can rise to the occasion. Haunting because it took a roster gutted by injuries for her to even get this chance. What happens when those players return? Will this version of Lexie Hull still have room to shine, or will she fade back into the shadows? The Fever face Minnesota again on Sunday, and that game could define their playoff hopes. Drop back-to-back losses, and the cushion disappears. Win, and maybe, just maybe, Hull's rise becomes a turning point everyone points back to. So now it's your turn. Is this season doomed by bad luck, or is it being wasted by bad decisions? And more importantly, has Lexie Hull finally earned the respect she deserves as more than just a role player? Comment below with your take. And if you believe in Lexie and the Fever, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on all notifications. Because this story isn't over, and what happens next might just shock everyone.